Hello there. Our topic for today is the basis of zodiac signs, Hellenistic bounds, and sign rulers in prime numbers. And what I'm going to suggest to you today is that prime numbers have a strong relationship to the existence of zodiac signs, to the ruling planets of the signs, and also to an idea that was used in ancient Western astrology known as the bounds. In the ancient Hellenistic form of astrology, they're often referred to as bounds, and in the later medieval tradition, they're often referred to as terms. Same thing. So this is an amazing concept and a new idea that there appear to be very strong relationships between prime numbers and things like zodiac signs, Hellenistic bounds, and sign rulers. Excuse me. Now, a little background to this. The complex rules of astrology were invented or discovered. They were put together, whatever you want to call it. Historians believe it was somewhere in the range of 700 to 200 BC, somewhere roughly in that time area. It may have been mostly over a few hundred years. The complex rules of astrology were developed. Before that, there was astrology, but without as complex and intricate rules. Now, some of the rules of astrology that were developed are simple and elegant, such as the elements and the modes. I've got a typo there. It says models, modes of the signs. In other words, the cardinal, fixed, mutable, the fire, earth, air, water. If you're a student of astrology, you're very familiar with this. And it's nice and simple. You start with the first sign, Aries, and you go right around. And it's a nice, simple, organized system. Now, there are other ideas that have been passed down in the ancient tradition and apparently developed somewhere in that first millennium BC, which are a little more odd. They're kind of peculiar. They seem rather arbitrary. Examples of these would be the bounds and why the fixed signs are used as the basis for sign rulerships. So here are the sign rulerships. As most of you know, the sun is the ruler of Leo. Mercury rules Virgo. Venus rules Libra. And many people now are aware that there's a symmetry here. If we start at 0 Leo and go around this way, we have Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And going the opposite way, we have the same exact thing, except we have the Sun and Moon paired together, and then the same planets in the same order. Now, so there are two things going on here. One is there's a symmetry at 0 Leo, and there's also an interesting thing at 0 Scorpio, this fixed sign cross at the beginning of the fixed signs. What's happening on this side, the Scorpio to Aries side, are the planets that move independently of the sun and moon. Or let's say they move far away from the sun and moon. Remember that ancient astrology was visual. People just looked out at the sky, and you see these three stars that can wander all around the sky, completely separate from the sun: Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Mercury and Venus are tied together. It's as if they're on a leash. They're tethered to the sun. They stay, Venus within about 47, 48 degrees of the sun. Mercury within about 27, 28 degrees. They stay close to the sun. And then the moon is like a sun that you see at night. The sun and moon are the same size. They're much larger. So you have the two lights, the sun and moon as they're often referred to, and the two planets that are attached, held on a leash to the sun, and then the three independent ones on the other side. So we have the solar lunar family here, and we have the outer, more distant, free roaming, wandering stars here. So there's two interesting things here: the symmetry around the 0 Leo, 0 Aquarius, and then this division of the kinds of wandering objects there are out there from the ancient point of view, separating the Scorpio to Aries. What's very peculiar about this whole arrangement is why the fixed signs are used. It's almost as if it's off balance. The Aries, the cardinal signs seem like the more natural starting point, but the thing is tilted to the fixed signs. As we'll see, this makes sense in terms of prime numbers as we proceed with this lecture today. Now, here are the bounds. They're even more bizarre. This is an idea that was used in Hellenistic and medieval astrology that each sign is divided into 5 pieces, but the 5 pieces are not equal. So Aries 0 to 6 is a Jupiter area, but Taurus 0 to 8 is a Venus area. And the general tendency, if you look at this long enough, is you'll notice the benefics tend to be towards the beginning of the 5 sections within each sign, and the last 2 signs tend to be the malefics, Mars and Saturn. The last bound, we call these the bounds. The 5th bound is always malefic. The 4th bound is often malefic, and then it gets kind of mixed up, and we're getting malefics thrown even into the 1st bound. So, there's a very rough and crude tendency for the malefics to be towards the end, always at the very end. But it's still unclear. Where do they come up with these ideas? It looks bizarre. Did they just dream this up? Did an extraterrestrial, land and tell them this? It's kind of wild. What we're going to see is that the prime numbers fit this pattern, at least to some extent. Rather extraordinary. By the way, this table of the bounds according to the Ptolemaic system, is this taken from astrologer Lee Lehman's website. There's the website address. I just copied it and pasted it in there. Lee has all kinds of great information on her website. Okay, now, so in this time period, 700 to 200 BC, somewhere around there, the complex rules of astrology are invented. What else is going on at that time? Well, mathematics is a big deal. It's very important, sometimes considered to have divine qualities. We have Pythagoras somewhere around the 500 BCs, Euclid somewhere around the 300 BCs. Some of the mathematics is public. Some of it is private and protected. The Pythagoreans were known for it's almost like a religion and secret information that was held by them. So mathematics holds a high place. So could mathematics have influenced the development of astrological ideas more than we realize? It would seem like they could. I mean, these are 2 hot topics of the time: the development of astrology, the development of mathematics. And what we're going to find out here is that prime numbers appear to be a basis for some of the seemingly arbitrary ideas that were developed. 3 exclamation points. Some of the properties of prime numbers coincide with astrological ideas. So this is something I've noticed. I haven't seen it referenced elsewhere, but it's something playing around with this that I've noticed, and it looks like it's too much of a coincidence. So we don't have any primary historical sources, at least I'm not aware of, that state that prime numbers are the basis of these ideas, but there are some very curious coincidences, a lot of them, and we're going to look at that. All right, so to understand this, let's get a feeling for prime numbers. Number 1, I've got 3 sections on this slide. The first slide is if you take your numbers and just start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with the even numbers on the right and the odd numbers on the left. Well, even numbers are not prime. You can consider the number 2 to be prime, but after that, they're not prime numbers. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Obviously, they're not. They're multiples of 2. So this is obvious. You can go through and put all the numbers there, and all the even numbers are non-prime, other than the first one, number 2, and some of the odd numbers are prime. Okay, no big deal, but it is a big deal in the sense that we immediately eliminate half of the integers up to infinity as knowing that they're not prime by doing this. Now, we can also remove multiples of 3. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. This is a well-known procedure going all the way back to Hellenistic Greece, where people did this, called the sieve of Eratosthenes. And an interesting thing is if you count 6 at a time, which in other words is 2 times 3, these colored numbers, I've got a mistake here, the 8 should be red. This is a red, this is red, these are the multiples, these are the even numbers, and the 3 and the 6 are this 3, 9, 15, 6, 12, 18. Well, the 6, 12, 18 is both multiple of 3 and 6. So you have your multiples of 3 and multiples of 2, multiples of 2, multiples of 2, multiples of 3. So the prime numbers, the bottom line is the prime numbers are in this column where you start with 1 and you add 6, 1, 7, 13, we add 6, we get 19, or 5, 11, 17. All prime numbers exist within these two columns. And interestingly, these two columns are equidistant from this midpoint of 3, 9, 15. It's just an observation. Well, I believe, I suspect, I'm proposing that the ancients noticed this and they related it to astrology, as we'll see in a minute. First of all, how many of these sections of 6, this is like a rhythm of 6. Prime numbers have a rhythm of 6 where all prime numbers are within these two columns, and these two columns occur in groups of 6. Well, there are 5, the same number as the bounds. So this grouping of numbers, I think, gets connected to the idea of the bounds, which I'll explain in more detail soon. Now, just to make this clear, not all numbers in this column are prime, but there are no numbers that are outside either this column or this column that are prime. Now, we can go one more level, and this is where the astrology really starts to kick in, and this becomes interesting, is that if we do 2 times 3 times 5, we get 30, and if we arrange the prime numbers, now I know this is small, but I hope you can read it. If we start counting from 1 to say 90, I stopped after 3 rows of numbers, the numbers that could be prime fall only in these columns. You start with 1 and you keep adding 30. You start with 7, you keep adding 30. You start with 11, keep adding 30. Similarly, you start with 17, 19, 23, or 29, and you keep adding 30, and all prime numbers up to infinity are in these columns and nowhere else. These others, the red, blue, and green, are multiples of 2, 3, and 5. So it's a very, very simple idea, but the fact it's simple does not mean it wasn't important. And again, it's symmetric. Very curiously, it's symmetric around the middle of what we can call the zodiac signs. So in the sign of Aries, 1, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, and 29 might be prime. In the sign of Taurus, 31, which in others is 1 degree Taurus, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, and 29, same degrees, might be prime. 49 is not prime. So many of these are prime, but not all of them. And I believe, as we'll see in the next slide, that when it's not prime, it means it's a strange area. It's not built on the basic 2, 3, and 5. It's built on a 7 or an 11. It's not built on the basic 30 system. So the number 49 is weird. So I believe what the ancients thought is when they saw this 49, they said there's a different vibration than the normal 30, than the 2, 3, and 5. That's the basis of the zodiac. We brought in a different quality. Same thing happens at 77, which is 11 times 7. So my theory is that the ancients might have noticed this pattern, related it to the zodiac, and where a prime number does not exist where we might expect it, such as the 49 and the 77, those become interesting degree areas that bring in a flavor other than the normal 2, 3, and 5. So the black numbers that are in these columns that are equidistant from the middle of the zodiac sign, you take the middle of the zodiac sign, you go back 2, 4, 8, or 14, and that's where all your prime numbers are. These black numbers excuse me, that are equidistant from the middle of the zodiac signs, they're either prime numbers, and prime numbers are considered to be good, is how I'm suspecting the ancient astrologers were thinking, who came up with these ideas. The numbers, the black numbers that are not prime, such as 49 and 77, are based on 7 or higher, by definition, and they have a spiritual quality. So 7 becomes a spiritual number that connects us to things beyond the basic zodiac, beyond the basic system of 30 degrees. They're somewhat malefic in the material world. They're dissonant in the material world. They present us with a larger perspective that's outside the scope of normal life. This is almost literal. This is not stretching very far, because literally the prime numbers are based on 2, 3, and 5. They are the lowest, most fundamental numbers. And any number from up to 360, within 360 degrees, is either prime, it's one of the basic numbers built on 2, 3, or 5, or it's built on 7. There's only one number, 121, and well, there's also another, 242. There are only two numbers that are based on 11 or higher. And 121, if you convert that to Zodiac, is the first degree of Leo. So there are only two numbers in the Zodiac that are based on 11 or higher, and that's 121 or 242 without any prime numbers that are lower. 121 is the beginning of Leo, which is the full power of the sun, and 11 is considered to be a master number. This may be the inspiration for thinking that 11 is a master number, because it's super transcendent, brings you into the light of the sun. It's also 11 times 11 times 2, which is 242, which is the second degree of Sagittarius, ruled by the great benefic Jupiter. So you get this idea that 2, 3, and 5 are fundamental. We have 2 hands, we have 2 feet, we have 2 genders. Number 3 appears everywhere. We have 5 fingers, we have 5 toes. Life is based on 2, 3, and 5. 7 appears every once in a while as a larger, more cosmic connection to the spiritual, and 11 is transcendent. You're in the center of the sun. You're at a master number. All of these ideas fit very nicely with just seeing how prime numbers are arranged and how closely they seem related to the Zodiac. So we end up with another set of conclusions, which is that the natural divisions of the Zodiac are either each degree, that the ancients felt that 360 was not an arbitrary number for the degrees of the Zodiac. Going back to the Rig Veda, there are statements indicating a belief that the Zodiac is organized into certain sections as a cosmic design, and each degree is important. The degrees are grouped together in multiples of 30 degrees to make the signs. They're also grouped into areas of 6 degrees, which is the average size of a Hellenistic bound. Now, why the Hellenistic bounds are not exactly 6 degrees is not clear, but we do have an average bound with the size of 6 degrees. So, what we're seeing is a relationship between how prime numbers are arranged and how the Zodiac is arranged. And this gets more and more detailed. The relationships get stronger and stronger. Here I'm showing a table of all the prime numbers. So here are the prime numbers from 1 to 359, and I've arranged them with 30 per line. So the prime numbers are 1, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29. We're leaving out 2, 3, and 5. They're the building blocks, and we can leave them out. And then the next prime numbers are 31, 37, 41, 43, 47, 53, 59. And we have a hole here. This is where the 49 would be, but it's based on 7. So we have little holes in our table, little blanks. We have one here in Taurus. We have one here in Gemini. We have 2 in Cancer, one at the beginning and end. We have 3 in Leo, 2 in Virgo, so on. 3 in Libra, 1 here, 2 at the end. So we have these little points, little spots along the way where there is no prime number and the symmetry is broken. Also, I'm playing around with this. I've grouped the first 2 prime numbers within a sign as the first pair. The second 2 are the second pair, and then the next 2 are the third pair and fourth pair. So I think there are 4 pairs of prime numbers. And if we assume that a missing prime number creates a transcendent malefic effect in that part of the sign, it matches the system of bounds. So in other words, early Cancer and early Leo have a malefic transcendent quality. Excuse me, because the prime number is not there. A 7 or 11 based number was brought in, making it more cosmic, out of the norm, more spiritual, and more difficult to deal with in normal life, so it's malefic. Beginning of Libra, Scorpio, Sag is also malefic, and the beginning of Aquarius is malefic. And it appears that what's most important is if there's a malefic right at the beginning, there are problems because normally the beginning is benefic, as we'll see as we look at these bounds again. Let me go back up to that table. Normally the beginning tends to be benefic and the end is malefic. So it's the sense of the bounds is that where the zodiac sign begins is good. In the Rig Veda it talks about the 12 spokes, these spokes which are the cosmic law, the wheel, the law of the wheel. They're good, they hold life in place, and the beginning of the sign is good, and then it gradually becomes more malefic, more distant from the anchored life in the material world. So we go from greatest benefic to most malefic. Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Saturn. From greatest benefic to most malefic. But if a prime number is missing at the beginning of the zodiac sign, you will get a malefic. So we get Mars and Saturn because there are prime numbers missing and a 7 or 11 base system is in place. And we're going to see that this concept fits precisely. Now, if you're getting confused and you think this is too far-fetched, keep in mind that all we're saying is that prime numbers are good, and where a prime number is missing creates a malefic influence. It's really that simple. So going back to my slide here, we're going to conclude that early Cancer and Leo, or early Libra, Scorpio, Sag are malefic, and early Aquarius is malefic. We have a very malefic end of Libra here because these two are here. So this is the first bound. The first bound is affected by the first two prime numbers. The second bound of each sign is affected by the next two prime numbers. The middle bound is not affected by prime numbers. It's a communication, a halfway point that communicates between the first half and the second half. So the fourth bound is ruled or influenced by these prime numbers, and the last bound, the fifth bound of each sign, is influenced by these pair of numbers. So we have the first bound, second bound, third bound is not controlled by prime numbers. It's a communicating stability point within the center of the sign, which is the center of symmetry, and then this pair influences the fourth bound and this pair influences the fifth bound. And if we assume a simple thing, which is where there's a missing prime number, there's a malefic influence, it matches the assignment to the bounds according to the text written by Ptolemy. And here it is. This is the same exact table that I showed you before, only what I've done is I've put in red where there's a missing prime number. Let me go back to the previous slide. Missing prime number in either the first or the third pair of bounds. The second pair doesn't seem to be that important. So if there's a missing prime number in the first or third pair, so we have a missing prime number in the third pair for Taurus and Gemini. Got it? Missing prime number for Taurus, Gemini, Virgo, etc. If I look at my table, missing prime number for Taurus, Gemini, Virgo, etc. So this red means that there's a missing prime number, a number based on 7 or 11, instead of a prime number where we would expect it, and so we're getting a malefic influence. And everywhere the same thing happening here, missing prime number at the beginning, and we have all the malefics except for one exception. I'll explain why that exception is in a moment. So let's analyze this more carefully. There are 4 signs that have a malefic in the first pair. I'm going to go back up and show it to you. Cancer, Leo, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. So Cancer, Leo, actually there are 5. Cancer, Leo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, and Aquarius. So Cancer, Leo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, Aquarius. There are 5 that have a malefic in the first pair, but only 4 of them have a malefic only in the first pair. So it's only Cancer, Leo, Libra, and Scorpio that have only a malefic in the first pair. If you have only a malefic in the first pair, it's as if the zodiac sign started off on the wrong foot. Instead of having nice prime numbers, there's a 7 or 11 cosmic influence disturbing our normal connection to the normal material world, and we get a malefic there. And the malefic is always the planet that's more dignified. Which malefic, Mars or Saturn, is more dignified in Cancer? Well, Mars and Moon are considered to be feminine, so Mars is more compatible with the feminine Moon-ruled sign of Cancer than Saturn, so Mars gets placed here. Saturn remains as the last bound. The last bound is always malefic. Which planet, Mars or Saturn, is more dignified in Leo? Well, Saturn is, because Saturn in ancient astrology has a solar or masculine sect. So the Saturn is placed there, Mars becomes the other malefic placed here. Which planet is more dignified in Libra, Mars or Saturn? Saturn is exalted in Libra. So Saturn gets placed in the first bound of Libra, Mars is left with the last bound. Which planet, Mars or Saturn, is more dignified in Scorpio? Mars rules Scorpio, Mars is placed there. So if there's a missing prime number, the malefic that has greater dignity is placed in the first bound. The rule works for all 4 signs, Cancer, Leo, Libra, Scorpio, perfectly. It seems like too much of a coincidence. Now we can look at the signs that have a additional malefic in the third pair, and that's Taurus and Gemini. Only third pair would be Taurus, Gemini, Virgo, and Capricorn. And all of 4 signs, except the sign that Saturn rules, are given Saturn. So instead of having Saturn at the end, Taurus, Gemini, and Virgo swap. They swap Mars and Saturn because of the additional malefic influence in this area of the zodiac. So because of that additional malefic influence, a 7 or 11 base prime number instead of a 7 or 11 base number instead of a prime number in this area of the zodiac sign, the greater malefic is put here and the lesser malefic is put at the end, breaking the archetypal pattern which Aries has. Aries has the archetypal pattern. No missing prime numbers from greatest benefic to most malefic. Excuse me. And then Capricorn is the exception to the rule where a malefic is placed there. It fits the rule. A malefic is always placed where there's a missing prime number. But it's Mars instead of Saturn, and it probably has to do with the rulership of Saturn ruling Capricorn. I don't completely understand that, but the rule that a malefic will always be placed where there's a missing prime number, a hole in that prime number table, always occurs. Now there are 2 signs where both the first and third pair have missing prime numbers, and those are Sagittarius and Aquarius. So these both, you might say, deserve to be malefic, and the way it's resolved is that the ruling planet of the sign is placed in the first bound. Same kind of rule we had for deciding whether Mars or Saturn is that if there are 2 bounds that are malefic, then the planet ruling the sign is put in the first bound. So we get Jupiter here, Saturn is here. The last bound is always malefic because it's so far away from the benefic influence of the beginning of the zodiac sign. And for Capricorn, we have both the first and fourth bounds should be malefic. The ruling planet of Aquarius is Saturn, so it's placed there. So we have an amazing coincidence that everywhere that there's a missing prime number in the distribution of prime numbers through the zodiac, a malefic is placed there. And furthermore, which malefic is consistent with the idea that we're going to tend to put the more dignified planet in the first bound, because even though it's malefic, it's still the first bound, so it's going to get the more dignified malefic at the beginning, or the more dignified planet. In the case of Sagittarius, and Aquarius, only one of them can be malefic because there are only two malefic planets. And in both cases, Jupiter was selected as the next planet to place in there. The additional details, why these are not all 6 degrees, exactly how it was decided which planets go in these other bounds, I don't know. But this discovery that a missing prime number becomes malefic because it's based on a more cosmic, less fundamental and grounded reality of 2, 3, and 5 works every single time to show these exceptions to the rule of why we don't have the archetypal pattern from greatest benefic to greatest malefic for each bound. So there it is. That's the theory of how prime numbers might be related to the bounds. So here are the conclusions about bounds. The first or fourth bound is dominated by numbers based on prime numbers 7 or higher, but not prime, is ruled by a benefic. So, it's just what I said. If you have a number 7 or higher influencing it, it's going to be ruled by a benefic. And here I mentioned what I just said. There are a lot of things we still don't know. Now, this continues. The ruling signs. This is really amazing. Let's take the next periodicity, the next rhythm of prime numbers. Remember, the first rhythm was 2. The next rhythm was 6, 2 times 3, right? Remember from the beginning of the lecture. You can distribute the prime numbers every 6. The third rhythm is 2 times 3 times 5. That creates the zodiac signs. The next one would be, you'd simply multiply the next prime number. There'd be little doubt in my mind that the ancients would be aware of this because they used the sieve of Eratosthenes. All you have to do is lay out the prime numbers in a fairly obvious sequence to see these periods. And so 2 times 3 times 5 times 7 equals 210. So 210, which in the zodiac is 0 Scorpio, becomes the fourth natural cosmic rhythm. So we have rhythms of 1 degree, which is obvious, every degree of the zodiac is important, 6 degrees, that's your bounds, which vary in size but average to be 6 degrees. Your zodiac sign, obviously, the major framework, and 210 degrees. This means that there should be some symmetry, something going on at 0 Scorpio. And 0 Scorpio, as noted before, is the basis of the ruling planet. So we have rulers of the bounds based on the symmetry of prime numbers, and we have ruling planets of the signs based on the symmetry of the prime numbers, and it tells us why the rulership is tilted to the fixed sign cross at 0 Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus, rather than what we might have intuitively thought it would be built at the cardinal signs. So 0 Scorpio, which begins after the first 7 signs, is the reference point for the next level of cycles, which include all 7 planets, the 5 visible planets plus the sun and moon, and is the larger perspective which includes our relatedness to the divine forces. So 0 degrees of Scorpio and the other points of the fixed cross at the beginning of the fixed signs become the framework for the rulership of the 7 planets, which are the 5 visible planets and the 2 lights. And I explained that earlier, how there's that symmetry and the division of the 3 outer wandering planets that can wander independent of the sun, and the sun and moon, Mercury and Venus, which are the lights, and the 2 planets connected or tethered to the movement of the sun. Excuse me. Now, so symmetry appears to have been observed and considered important because it seems to impact the bounds, the ruling planets of bounds, and the ruling planets of the signs. Also, I have more information on this that I'm not covering here in this lecture at the website matrixdcochran.wordpress.com, which I have up here. Here it is. This website, matrixdcochran.wordpress.com. This morning I uploaded a more detailed paper that goes into some more technical details on symmetries created by prime numbers. So if you're interested, you could read that article if you want to dig into some of the technical details of this even more. And it talks about how these symmetries are very strong at the beginning of the fixed signs. Anyway, there's additional information. Is all I just want to let you know about those papers if you want to read them. If you want to pursue this further, here's that cross again that I referred to earlier. I've already explained that. There's also more information in papers 45, 46, and 47 at astrosoftware.com/astrologyarticle.htm. I'll show you real quickly that website. Let's see, this is going off my captured area a little bit. It's a little bit better. So if you go to astrosoftware.com/astrologyarticle.htm, you'll see these papers 45, 46, 47, which also talk about the relationship of prime numbers to the zodiac and to the bounds. Same information I'm giving here, a little harder to follow. I think it's easier to follow my explanation here, where I can show you these things and discuss them, than in the paper, but the paper does have some additional technical information. So final conclusions, and we're done here, is number one: the pattern of planetary rulers of bounds and zodiac signs is closely related to the pattern of prime numbers. They're closely related. Is it a coincidence? Is it too much to be a coincidence? Did the ancient people use these ideas in formulating the ideas about bounds and ruling planets? Well, my sense of it is that the extreme similarity and consistency of the relationship and the agreement with traditional ideas in numerology, such as 7 being spiritual, 11 being a master number, and so on, it appears to be more than a coincidence. And also, there are other ideas I kind of jumped over very quickly, which is that the rhythm of 210 degrees reinforces the importance of 30 degrees, because as you go every 210 degrees, you would get to the next sign. I mentioned that in this first paragraph, that if we go from 0 Scorpio and we jump 210 degrees, we end up at 0 Gemini. So once you get beyond the basic 30-degree framework, which is zodiac signs, any additional rhythms that we get by multiplying to the next level will be multiples of 30 degrees. Mathematically, this is simple, but I think the implications are tremendous, that this may have reinforced the sense by ancient astrologers that there really is a cycle of 30-degree signs, the 12 30-degree signs. Okay, so my last point in this last paragraph is that the development of complex astrological rules at a time when mathematics was also of great interest to the intellectuals of the time appears to have resulted in astrological theory that was highly influenced by ideas in mathematics. This suggestion is a significant departure or development from current ideas on the early development of astrological theory, somewhere in the time period between 700 and 200 BC. So in other words, this time period, somewhere in the first millennium BC, when these intricate rules were developed, is critically important in understanding how astrology was initiated, and the ideas that became the basis for later astrology. At the same time, mathematics was very important, and we're seeing here that, as at least I would expect, there would be some cross-fertilization between these disciplines, and in particular, mathematics probably had a strong influence on some of the astrological ideas, and very interestingly, those astrological ideas that don't seem intuitively obvious, such as why the symmetry of ruling planets should be centered around fixed signs instead of cardinal signs, or why there seem to be these arbitrary bounds, fits beautifully with prime numbers, and prime numbers are just extremely fundamental and important and special in Hellenistic mathematics as well as today. So there you have it, my friends. We're done. I hope you found that interesting. The basic idea that I'm introducing here is that there are some possible inspirations and concepts that inspired people to develop these early models of astrology, and they're just things that I happen to notice by studying and analyzing these things, with the expectation that there probably are close relationships, and sure enough they are. We have not proven anything. You can call it a conjecture, and people can be skeptical or be inclined to be positively impressed with these relationships. The bottom line from my point of view on this is that I think the coincidences are much, much, much too great to be merely coincidences. I suspect that they're directly related, and historically this comes as absolutely no surprise, given the strong emphasis on mathematics at the time that these astrological ideas were being developed. Okay, thank you very much. God bless. Take care. Namaste.